It doesn't begin with your salary. It doesn't begin with your spending. It begins somewhere you never agreed to enter. There is a pattern, hidden in plain sight. And once you notice it, saving money stops being a discipline problem. It becomes something else entirely, a design problem. Most people believe they are losing money through decisions. But what if the decisions are already decided before you make them? Look closely at the last time you tried to save. You probably remember the intention, the clarity, the discipline, but not the outcome, because the outcome never feels like a failure. It feels like disappearance, like something quietly removed it without asking you. That is where the trap begins, not in spending, but in the moment between intention and action, where your money stops belonging to you, even while it is still in your hands. You just haven't noticed who it belongs to yet. 10 seconds earlier, there was certainty. I will save this month. But certainty is fragile in systems you don't understand, because the system does not argue with you. It waits. Then it offers something small, harmless, reasonable, a justification that sounds like you. You deserve this. You can start saving next month. It's just this once. And here is the strange part. You don't feel convinced. You feel permissioned, as if something inside you signed a document you never read. This is not temptation. Temptation is loud. This is administration, quiet, legal, invisible. And the most dangerous systems are not the ones that force you. They are the ones that make you agree. Now look again at your financial life, not as numbers, but as behavior loops. Every month follows a pattern so consistent it stops feeling like choice. Income arrives, a brief expansion happens in the mind, then immediate compression. Bills, needs, obligations, emergencies that were not emergencies yesterday. And somewhere in that compression, savings is always last in line. Not rejected, just postponed until it becomes impossible. But here's the first fracture in understanding. What if saving money is not something you fail to do? What if it is something you are prevented from doing at the exact moment it becomes possible? Stay with that thought, because it will not stay still. You might think discipline is the missing piece, but discipline assumes freedom of choice, and most people never actually reach the moment where choice is clean, because by the time they decide, the money has already been reassigned, internally, emotionally, socially. The system doesn't take your money. It pre-spends your identity. Let that settle, because now we enter something deeper. Imagine your income is not money. Imagine it is attention, a kind of psychological oxygen that arrives every month. Now imagine every demand on that income is not a bill, but a voice, each one saying, I existed before your intention. Rent says it, food says it, status says it more quietly, but more urgently. And savings? Savings has no voice at first. It only speaks in absence, which means most people are not choosing between saving and spending. They are choosing between loud claims and silent potential. And silence always loses in the beginning. Always. But something strange happens when silence is ignored long enough. It becomes pressure, and pressure always returns somewhere else. Debt, anxiety, restarted promises, familiar frustration. You don't lose money. You recycle the same financial emotion under different names. Now we shift slightly, because the trap is not only external, it is architectural. There is a structure in modern life that makes saving feel like resistance. Not because saving is hard, but because everything else is designed to feel urgent. Urgency is not reality. Urgency is engineered attention, and when everything is urgent, nothing can be prioritized except reaction. And reaction cannot build wealth. Only intention can. But intention requires space, and space is the first thing your environment removes. Look at your day. Look at your phone. Look at how quickly decisions are demanded from you before reflection is possible. Now notice something uncomfortable. Your money behaves the same way. Income arrives and immediately disappears into reaction layers. Not strategy, reaction. Now we enter a deeper layer. Because even if you removed all expenses, something would still pull the money away. And this is where most people stop thinking. But we won't. Because the real mechanism is not spending, it is justification. Every financial leak begins as a story, a reason that feels emotionally correct. I've been stressed, I worked hard, I need balance. These are not lies. They are permissions disguised as identity repair. And identity repair always feels necessary, because without it, the self feels deprived. So what is actually being saved when you try to save money? Not money, self-image stability. And when saving threatens that stability, it loses before it begins. Now pause here, because this is where understanding usually collapses into blame. But blame is another distraction layer, so we go deeper instead. If your financial behavior is predictable, then it is not personal. It is programmed. And anything that is programmed can be interrupted. But interruption requires noticing the exact moment the program executes, not before, not after, during. And that moment is almost invisible. It happens in less than a second. Between I should save this and I will just, that gap is where entire financial futures are decided. And most people never enter it consciously. Now something begins to shift. Because once you see the gap, you start noticing its shape. It always looks the same. A justification wrapped in emotional logic, a small narrative that feels like you, but is slightly faster than you. And speed is the clue. Whatever convinces you fastest is not truth, it is habit. Let that sit. Now we reach a contradiction. If saving requires discipline, but spending requires speed, then the system is biased toward loss. Not because it hates you, but because it rewards immediacy. And immediacy always wins against abstraction. Savings is abstraction, future self, delayed reward, unseen benefit. The brain does not feel those things. It calculates them poorly, but it feels urgency perfectly. So now the trap is visible, not emotional, structural. But here's where it deepens again, because even if you understood all this, you would still encounter resistance. Not from money, from meaning. Because saving money quietly challenges something deeper, your permission to not fulfill every desire immediately. And that is not a financial problem. That is identity friction. Now the system tightens. Because every time you attempt to save, you are not just rejecting spending, you are rejecting a version of yourself that wants relief now. And that version does not disappear easily. It argues, it rationalizes, it returns stronger next time. This is why savings attempts often feel like internal conflict rather than financial strategy. Now we interrupt the pattern because something does not fit. If every failure to save is caused by internal negotiation, then wealth is not about income. It is about who gets to speak last in your mind. And most people never choose that consciously. Now the deeper layer begins to surface. There are actually two selves involved, one that experiences time and one that negotiates it. The present self is always louder, the future self is always theoretical. And the trap is that the present self is also the one making decisions on behalf of both. So every time you decide not to save, you are not choosing against saving. You are choosing against a person who is not present enough to defend themselves. That is the silent imbalance. Now the emotional weight starts to shift. Because this is no longer about money management, it is about representation. And representation always fails in systems optimized for immediacy. Now we approach the midpoint rupture, because everything so far suggests awareness should fix it, but it doesn't. Not yet. Because awareness alone does not remove permission structures, it only exposes them. And exposure without replacement creates tension. Which is why even after understanding the trap, you still feel it operate. You still find yourself repeating it, just more consciously. This is where frustration begins, because now you see the mechanism, but not the exit. And this is intentional in systems like this. They are not designed to be invisible forever. They are designed to be seen, too late to easily escape. Now a deeper contradiction appears. What if saving money is not about restriction, but about reclaiming authorship over the moment of decision? Because right now, authorship is outsourced to urgency, to emotion, to environment, and anything outsourced becomes reactive. Now we enter controlled tension phase because the obvious advice would be just automate savings. But that misses the psychological truth. Automation does not fix authorship. It bypasses it, and bypassed systems eventually leak somewhere else. Not always money, sometimes desire, sometimes self-control, sometimes identity fatigue. Because the real resource being negotiated is not currency, it is agency. Now everything converges slowly, the fragments begin to align: urgency, justification, identity, speed, representation. They are not separate problems, they are one loop viewed from different angles. And that loop is simple: money arrives, identity expands, urgency claims, justification approves, future self is postponed, cycle resets. And nothing in that loop is irrational. That is what makes it powerful. Now the final distortion appears. Because if the system is this consistent, then failure is not random, it is predictable. And if it is predictable, it is also interruptible. But interruption does not come from motivation, it comes from delay. A pause inserted at the exact point where justification tries to form. That pause is small, almost invisible, but it is where authorship returns. Now we are close to resolution, but not yet clarity. Because clarity without tension release is just information, and information alone does not change behavior. So instead, notice this: every financial regret you have ever had came from a moment that felt completely reasonable at the time. That is the real danger. Reasonable decisions inside distorted timing. Now everything collapses into one insight. You are not struggling to save money. You are navigating a system that constantly negotiates your future in favor of your present. And unless that negotiation is interrupted, nothing changes. Not income, not ambition, not discipline. Now silence increases, because the truth is simple enough to feel uncomfortable. There is no final trick, no hidden financial rule. No perfect budgeting system that overrides this. Only one shift matters: who gets to pause the moment before you agree. And in that pause, something changes shape. Not money, not behavior, but ownership of time inside the mind. And once that ownership returns, saving stops being something you try to do. It becomes something that is no longer automatically taken away. Quiet ending. Most people think they need more money to change their life, but what they actually need is a fraction of a second where their future is allowed to speak first. And very few people ever hear it.